Hey everybody, Tom Carnell here, Carnell Knowledge, a show I do here on YouTube every Monday and Friday, and I do a bunch of shorts during the week recommending and reviewing movies and books and stuff. I was looking at YouTube today and saw kind of a fun idea, and I thought I'd try it out. First of all, I'm away from my desk and I'm here on the balcony and I'm hanging out, and it's a beautiful day in Bellingham, Washington. So the idea was Scott over at the Prog Corner was going along with some things that other people are doing, and that was to talk about the first 10 records that they ever purchased with their own money as they were growing up. Now, I was a kid who, around the age of 5, I was having trouble in school. I wasn't hearing very well. And it turns out that my tonsils and my adenoids were blocking my ear drainage, and I was unable to hear. And so I had a surgery that was very popular at the time, where they lance your eardrum and put little tubes in there and help relieve the pressure. And suddenly I could hear. And then for the next few years, I was sort of adapting to the feeling of having someone's hands over your ears and then their hands taken away. Suddenly you could hear everything. And my school improved, my life improved. And little by little, I started to feel myself being, slowly gravitating more and more towards music and film. My mom was a big music person. I grew up mostly with big band stuff and stuff, listening to her music. Columbia Record Club was a really big deal in our lives, where you could get a bunch of records for free and then you'd buy others at their inflated price to sort of pay it back. And it exposed me to a lot of different stuff, and I was able to get my hands on some records that I normally wouldn't have been able to. So I thought I'd run down a list here I have and talk a little bit about them. I have no notes, which is really rare for me. So we'll start, I think, with some 45s, because we grew up with not a lot of money at our house. So the idea that I could go down to Gemco and pick up, like a 45 for like 99 cents, that was reasonable, where the records weren't expensive back then, but 99 cents was something I could justify to my mom about, hey, can I get this thing? It's just 99 cents, And so more often than not, she would let me. So let's start with, I just have 5 45s that kind of stuck out in my memory. And let's start here in 1970 with this is not going to be, first of all, this is not going to be terribly, some of these aren't prideful moments in my history, and some of them were downright embarrassing. But the first 45 I ever bought was in 1970. I was about 10 years old. It was Frida Payne's Band of Gold. And to this day, whenever I hear it, I just think about being, 10 and put the little insert inside the 45 and putting it on. And yeah, it was very, very cool having my own music. It wasn't the music of my mom. It wasn't the music of, I had 2 older sisters who would later go on to influence a lot of this list, because music in the house, you would hear it, and it was usually them playing it. So Frida Payne Band of Gold was a big deal around that. And then I loved that so much that it became easier the next time I came to my mom and said, hey, here's another 45. Can I buy that for 99 cents? And my second one was Frigid Pink and their version of House of the Rising Sun, which to this day I still think is the version of that song, even though it wasn't the first version. But it really was a big deal when I hear it, because I was like, yeah, man, House of the Rising Sun is so cool. And I used to play that, both of those records, just go from one song to the other, to the other, to the other. And it got to be like part of the ritual of taking one record off and putting one record on. And later, who knew that that's, working at Tower and Warehouse and all those other places, that I would be putting on it, taking off a lot of records over the years. And let's see, a couple of years later, I remember picking up a 45 that I still can't hear today without grinning a little, and that is Hot Butter and the song Popcorn. If you remember Hot Butter's Popcorn. Just good fun, good stupid fun. And, it was one of those things where I remembered the record disappearing one day. I guess my sisters had just had about enough hot buttered popcorn for for themselves, and they kidnapped my record, never to return. And then following that, a year later, I remember picking up a 45 of the OJs and For the Love of Money, because that bass line was just so cool, you know, and the lyrics were really neat, and you know, really, I thought, yeah, man, For the Love of Money, that's exactly how I feel about cash, and you know, there you go. And then finally, the last 45 I want to talk about is this one was a big one for me. I played grooves into this 45, and that's 10cc's Wall Street Shuffle. I thought the guitar was cool. It was right around the time that I was picking up a guitar, and I really liked the tone of it, and just the general vibe of it. And to this day, I still think that 10cc is a band that just doesn't get the respect they deserve. I think they are one of the most important, like, sort of art rock, proto-progressive bands, and people just don't give them their due, and that really sucks. All right, so moving on to full albums. I'm going to save the very first record that I ever bought, full album with my own money. I scrimped and saved. I'm going to save that till the very end. I think I've mentioned it on the show before, but I'll save it for like a treat at the end. First thing, Crosby, Stills and Nash, the self-titled record. There was a girl that my sisters were friends with. Her name was Judy Jones, and I was all of 9 or 10. Oh, was I sweet on Judy Jones? And I remember Sweet Judy Blue Eyes came out, and I was like, yeah, it's like the music of my life. And I still remember driving in a car on a long distance and sitting next to her and acting like I was falling asleep so that I could put my head on her shoulder. And yeah, it's kind of wild. I haven't thought about that in a long time. I'm going to follow that up sort of as a subsection of this with Crosby, Stills and Nash's Deja Vu in 1970. Again, all of that string of hits that CSNY had was really important around the time. My sisters were listening to it. It seemed like counterculture and adult music, and it was very, very cool. Yeah, and it was right around this time that I first picked up a guitar. And so there were a lot of things that were influencing me at the time, and yeah, which brings us to our second record, and that is a record I've talked about on this show before, and that's Rockin' the Fillmore by Humble Pie from 1971. This record blew me away. I mean, there was blues and rock, and I had no idea that later, when Peter Frampton got big and all the girls liked Peter Frampton, and Frampton Comes Alive became a thing, I had no idea that he was in Humble Pie. All I knew is that Steve Marriott had a great voice and the band was solid, and really, really enjoyed that stuff. And that's a great record. I stand by the fact that that's one of the greatest live records of all time. And I talked about it just recently in a weekend episode about greatest live albums. Following that, I had a neighbor named Bill Knudsen, whose dad was a pastor, and Bill was very straight-laced, and he wasn't into the rock and roll stuff, and we were hanging out a lot as kids, and so he turned me on to a couple of things that are on this list, and so I felt like I needed to include them. 1971, I would have been about 11. Don McLean's American Pie. American Pie was on the radio, and that was a big deal. Really struck my imagination. And then I heard Vincent, and Vincent was like, "Oh my God, this is powerful stuff," and it was really important for me, my young Tom, being 11. I thought, I was like, yeah, it really drove home the idea of the tortured artist. Let's see. Following that, another live record that I talked about on the live record show, and that is At the Fillmore East with the Allman Brothers. The first time I heard In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, blown away. As a guitar player, blown away. The emotion there, all the other stuff that was on there, on that record, it was recorded really well. I had by then just developed a distaste for live records because I thought they all sounded muddy, but this was crisp and clean, and the music was great, the playing was great, and Dwayne Allman was the shit. And it was later, just a short time later, that he passed, and then that really drove the importance of that record home. And then another one, Bill Knudsen heavily influenced me on this one. John Denver, Rocky Mountain High. We sat under his tree for weeks with a guitar book and trying to play Rocky Mountain High and playing it, just ad nauseum, just playing that. We used to play American Pie. We used to play Vincent, just banging away on these old guitars that we had. And drinking, I remember drinking chocolate milk. They used to deliver milk to our people's doorways, and my mom would splurge and get a thing of chocolate milk. And I sat there on many a summer day and just drank myself sick on chocolate milk and banging on this guitar, just going, yeah, Rocky Mountain High, man. John Denver was the bomb. He was on all TV and all these shows, and yeah, just very, very cool. Up next, this one was a direct influence from my sisters, and this Al Green, Let's Stay Together. It was so soulful that I was really blown away by how touching it was, and how he just seemed to hit that groove and be very, very cool. And this record, to this day, every time I hear it, that organ, I was just like, yeah, that's the stuff right there. And then let's see, I was 13, and my sisters they knew that I was into music, and they gave me a record that at first I hated. I didn't want anything to do with it. And then just more and more I listened to it, the more and more I really came to really, really like it. And that is Jake Giles' Bloodshot. There's so many good songs on that. Just one, forget all the centerfold and all that stuff from the 80s. 1973 Bloodshot is the bomb. And that got me into like some of the live albums, and Magic Dick on harmonica, and just a great band. And people don't talk about them the way they should, especially the early stuff. They get dismissed because of all the MTV fame they got. Bloodshot is such a great record. And let's see, cut just a couple more. One of the records that came as a result of the Columbia Record House thing was Mott the Hoople Live. I don't remember why I picked it. I had heard that they were popular. I had heard they did a couple of Bowie songs. And at the time, I want to say I had heard Ariel Bender on guitar on something else. And so I got it. And at first, again, it was one of those things that at first I didn't like it. And I played it again, and I didn't have a lot of records at this time. I had a few, but not a lot. Like later, once I became a buyer for Tower, my records dominated my life. I have pictures of just rack after rack after rack of records and that kind of thing. But the more I listened to it, the more I really liked it. And to this day, I think it's a great album. It's not the best live album of all time, but it's up there. It has a sentimental meaning to me for some reason. And then the last thing big in my life in the mid 70s was things like Midnight Special and Don Kirshner's rock concert and that kind of thing. And I had heard of a guy came on one episode, I want to say it was Midnight Special. Anyway, I had no idea who he was, and he had this new record out. It was a self-titled record, and that's the recently passed Dave Mason. The White Album has one of the best versions of All Along the Watchtower I've ever heard. And more and more I listen to it, and just really, and to this day, when he passed, I threw it on, and it's as good today as it ever was. It's just absolutely fantastic. So yeah, that's the list. The reason I wanted to do this is, one, be a little biographical, a little fun, and I thought that might be a change of pace, but also just the importance of music and how records can act as like signposts on the road of your life. And then years later you'll hear, I hear American Pie, and it just takes me right back. Another single I could have added on here was Uncle Albert from Paul McCartney. It's another thing, very, very of its time. I remember when I was listening to it, when it was on the radio. back when you used to sit by the radio with your little cassette recorder and try to tape the songs and not get the commercials and that kind of thing. It's very different than it is today. But yeah, just how important music can be, and how important music is. And especially if you're a person who music is sort of a touchstone for you and who you are and part of your identity, how just fundamental all of this stuff can be. Uh, so yeah, that's my top 10 the first records I ever bought with my own money. And it looks like the sun's coming over the top of the house, so I'm going to get it in the eyes in a minute. So I think I will end that here. I want to thank everyone for listening or watching the show, watching the shorts, subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I do really appreciate it. It's a chance for me to show people things that they may not have heard, things that I've encountered that I think, like, why isn't this more popular? Why is this not popular and this is, when this is crap? So there's so much stuff out there, and I just appreciate you all taking the time to click play and like and subscribe and all that other stuff. Real briefly, I want to talk about June 15th, I have a new book coming out called Open Late. It is a short story collection in a portmanteau format where there's a story arc that continues through the book, and then within that arc, people tell stories, and that's the short story collection. The book is an ode to story and storytelling. When I was a child, I grew up with my grandfather, who was from England, and we would go down to Santa Maria where he lived, and I would just spend hours sitting on the ground playing with toys and listening to him talk, as he would say, it was always great when granddad was like, one time, and then he would regale with this amazing story. He was just one of the best storytellers I've ever heard. So that's what this book is. It's sort of an ode to that, about how we are, the stories we tell, and how the stories that we cling to in many ways are indicative of who we are, and that's kind of what Open Late is all about. So I'd appreciate it if you go ahead and pre-order that. It's over at Amazon. The Kindle's $4.99. When the print book comes out on that day, it'll be $12.99. But I'm very proud of the book, and I think that people will enjoy it as well. So that's going to do it. I will be back with a short tomorrow, and I will be back with a show on Monday and Friday, and same as it ever was. All right, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.